Okay, we are going to start part 1 of completing the square today. We're going to do the basics of it and get in the habit of it. It's another way to solve eventually. So we've solved based on factoring. We've solved by taking square roots. We can solve by completing the square. We're not going to solve today, but we're going to look at the little components of it. And you're also going to need to know how to factor to do completing the square. Okay, so all of this is coming back. So there's like a formula we use. I wouldn't call it necessarily a formula, but it's b divided by 2 squared. And then we'll simplify that and have something squared. Okay? You're going to need to know that for completing the square. So we're still dealing with a quadratic, which means we'll have 3 terms. The highest exponent is still a 2, but in this case now we are finding that third term. And we want to find a third term, so we're going to complete the square. To form a perfect square trinomial. Oops, I don't need that S. So we're going to complete the square to form a perfect square trinomial. Literally today is just the basics on everything. So you might see something that looks like x squared minus 8x plus something. So we're filling in that blank, that's something, okay? And that blank is filled in with b divided by 2 squared. Who can tell me what my b term is? Just the b term, negative 8. Okay, it doesn't involve the variable. So in this case, a is 1, b is negative 8. We're filling in c. Okay, so I'm going to take this formula, if that's what we want to call it, and figure out what this c term is. So negative 8 divided by 2 squared is what? So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. Okay, that's what we're filling in there. We then can factor this, and we need to be able to factor this. So our step 1 is to complete the square, to fill in that blank. Our step 2 is going to be to factor. Now, we know how to factor when there's a leading coefficient of 1, right? What do we use?
X.
Okay, so if we use the x, on top is 16, on bottom is negative 8. What two numbers multiply to 16 and add to negative 8?
Negative 4, negative 4.
Okay. Because they are perfect squares, perfect square trinomials, these two numbers will always be the same for completing the square. Okay? Which means my factored form for this is x minus 4 times x minus 4. Does anyone else, or does anyone know how else I can write that? Okay, you need to be able to write it as x minus 4 squared. So for completing the square, we have to do this step, and then we solve by taking square roots, which we'll do tomorrow. Okay, I want to get into the habit of being able to fill this piece in, and then remembering how to factor, because our factoring test is not so good. Which you'll see in, I'm sure you've seen your score, but you'll see the test here, I don't know, in 10 minutes or so. Okay, so we're filling in this piece by using b divided by 2 squared, and then you're writing it in factored form. That's all we're doing today. Okay, so let's look at the second one. Now I'm going to show you something else instead of having to use the x. If you like the x, continue to do it. But let's go through those steps. So we're going to fill in that blank. So what is my b term? 12. So 12 divided by 2 squared, right? 12 divided by 2 is 6. Now, I'm going to write a second step in here just so you can see something. So I have 6 squared, and 6 squared is 36, so that fills in this blank. Everyone okay with that? Now, if I go to factor it, I'm still going to use the x, but I'm going to show you something cool, I guess. I don't know. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 36 and add to 12. 6 and 6. Do you see anything? It's the same as what's in here once you simplify that fraction. Always. Negative 8 divided by 2 is what? Okay, so if you don't remember that, the x works just fine and you can fill it in and you can factor. Okay, so if you see it, great. If you don't, you can continue to use the x. But this is x plus 6 times x plus 6, right? But because I know those are going to be the same, I can just go straight to x plus 6 squared. If you can get this step down, the rest of it is just taking square roots. Okay, let's do one more together. Yep.
When you see the 6 squared, do you have to write the x down, or can you just skip that step?
You can skip that step and go straight to this. Okay, now I'm showing you the process because some of you can't skip steps like that and go straight from here to here. But if you can, by all means do. So that's what we're going to do in the next problem so you can see how it works. So I'll do this one with you. Let's do... ignore that. Hold on. I don't want you to see what I just wrote. Seriously? There we go. I almost gave you the answer. So what is my B term? Negative 10. So negative 10 divided by 2 squared is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25, so I'm still going to fill that in there, but instead of doing the x, I can say that this factored, for sure, is x minus 5 squared.
So you don't have to do your practice or your x.
You do not have to, if you remember that whatever this is, once it's simplified, goes in the parentheses. Okay? Now, here's always everyone's favorite problem. So we're going to do this one together too. Can't have decimals. So, what's my B term?
15.
Negative 15. So negative 15 divided by 2 squared. Can you simplify negative 15 over 2? No. Okay, so we're going to leave that as is. What is negative 15 over 2 squared? So what's negative 15 squared? 225. What's 2 squared? 4. So it's 225 over 4, This is my fraction simplified, right? I can't simplify it anymore. So factored form of this is x minus 15 over 2.
Well, then why did you even?
Okay, so up here, right, I simplified. And I got negative 5. And that's what went in my parentheses, right? Here, I can't simplify without making it a decimal, and we don't want decimals. So that's my simplified form, so that's what goes in my parentheses. When you actually take this quadratic, and do an x, and figure out what two numbers multiply that and add to negative 15, you get negative 15 halves times negative 15 halves.
So you needed the part where you had to like multiply it to put your blank space.
Correct.
But you leave it because you couldn't do it. So you okay.
Correct. So you need this piece, like you need to actually fully simplify it because that's what goes in your blank. But before, like after it's simplified is what goes in your parentheses in factored form. Do you want one more fraction one?
Yeah.
Okay. How about, do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and try it. Okay, are we ready to see? So my b term is negative 3 divided by 2 squared. Can I simplify, like, can I reduce that fraction at all? No, but I can simplify it. Negative 3 squared is 9. 2 squared is 4, so that's what goes in my blank. Factored form is x minus 3/2 squared. Did you get that? What's wrong? Oh. Are we okay with that? Not too bad? Okay.